Well, hi, Monique. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
I know. We have a mutual friend that connected us, so I'm really grateful for that because I'm loving what we're going to talk about today. But before we dive into some of that stuff, I do want to go back. We know where you are now according to your bio, but I want to go back to that pivotal moment, that life-changing event that happened that brought you to where you are today. Can you share a little bit of that story with us?
Sure. Yeah, it happened in 2019 and it was one single breath changed everything. I was at the end of a 10-day retreat with my daughter. We were in Bali and it was a yoga meditation retreat. And at the end of the retreat, I was just reflecting on how I was feeling. I was sleeping really well, which was unusual because I had been an insomniac for years at that point. So I was sleeping and I noticed I took a deep breath and I felt no pain in my chest. And that's when I realized for the first time that I had been carrying anxiety
Mm.
my entire career. I always had this tightness in my chest. And when I could take that deep breath, I realized I made a commitment to myself to find a way to live my life so I could breathe deeply and have peace of mind. I had those two goals, very simple goals, for about 2 years, and it really helped focus my efforts, my
Mhm.
free time um, after that moment.
And so you went back after Bali. And what happened after Bali, though? I feel like because of this revelation that you had on that trip, some things really changed in your life after that.
hmm hmm Yeah, so it started a learning journey, and I wanted to learn ways to manage my anxiety and manage my insomnia. And I just started to read, listen to podcasts. I took workshops, and I ended up taking a teacher training with a woman who I listened to her podcast on my way to work.
Mhm.
It was called Mindful in Minutes. And Kelly Smith is her name. She's American, and I would listen to her podcast. She has podcasts on every topic under the sun. There were a few that were about anxiety, helping you sleep and so on. So she became a regular on my podcast playlist. And I heard she was coming to Toronto. So I decided to sign up for her class. And she was teaching a restorative yoga teacher training.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to take that course. And then I did a yoga nidra course with her. And yoga nidra is like yoga for the inside, I call it. It's a deep restorative state where you're in between being awake and being asleep. So I took that course and I started putting these um, learnings into place into my own life, and I was starting to see results. And then that pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so she moved her courses online, and I did a meditation teacher training during the pandemic, which I found really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I heard about forest therapy, which is Shinrin Yoku in Japan, started in Japan. And again, it was still in the pandemic, but it was kind of in between, when there was people could gather in small groups. So I signed up for it. It was a month later after discovering this forest therapy training, and I went and spent 8 days in the forest with other participants to learn how to be forest therapy guides. And after that, there was a 6-month practicum where every day we had to spend at least 10 to 20 minutes out in nature. And that really was so transformational because it opened my eyes to a whole world I didn't even know existed. Like just right before our eyes, there's just so much energy in life and in the wildlife and nature, and starting to really connect with nature and really slow down. I think that was probably the practice that made the biggest impact on me. Um, And then after that, during all of this time, I was seeing a Reiki practitioner. And she had told me that you can do Reiki on yourself. And I mean, she was always so very helpful to me. So I decided to take the course. All of this was for my own healing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so Reiki opened up this whole spiritual world for me. So I think the combination of all of these practices within a 2-year period was really changed the direction of my life.
Yeah, enough that you quit your corporate job.
Mhm.
And this is really what you're doing full time now, right? But you're also, I guess, transition, not only I think from, a personal standpoint and even a spiritual standpoint, it sounds like, but um, from a lifestyle standpoint, you have
Mhm.
also transitioned to what we call now, which didn't have a name many years ago, but digital nomad. And so that's where you are right now, yes. And so
Mhm.
tell us
Location
how,
independent lifestyle.
right, right.
Yes.
So share with us how that whole transition happened because if we know, I know other digital nomads will tell you, especially if you're doing this full time, there's a transition from the conventional way of living, whether it's you have a house, you have property, or you have a salaried job or whatever it is, right? And there's this transition that happens to kind of get to the other side, right? And a lot
Mhm.
has to change. So share with us what that evolution looked like for you. I know you were doing a lot of this personal diving in, and seems like while that was happening, you might have been also working on this digital nomad lifestyle at the same time.
I no,
No,
actually, they
okay.
were a little bit separate. I mean,
Separate.
I've
Okay.
always loved to travel. I've traveled a lot with my daughter and my partner. But when I left, I worked in financial services for 20 years. And when I left, I just knew it was time for me to go. And I remember having that conversation with my boss. And she said, "You're going to save the world one person at a time." And because I
Mm-hmm.
said to her, "I don't know what I'm leaving for. I just know it's time to go."
Yeah.
And I also knew I wanted to explore all of these practices and try to help other people, um, be able to breathe and feel calm and find relaxation and rest in their lives. And so, but I didn't know what that looked like.
Yeah.
And the day after I left my job, my partner, Andrew, and I got on a plane and went to Costa Rica for 1 month. And we did a trial to see, he's a coach. So we did a trial to see what life would feel like
Yeah. Right.
working elsewhere. So he would do his coaching practice. He didn't miss a beat. And
Mm.
I went to a yoga center that was right next to our Airbnb called the Peace Retreat in Playa Negra, tiny little village in Costa
Okay.
Rica,
Yeah.
and owned by Canadians. And
Oh,
I
okay.
got to know them, and they really, it was wonderful to be able to go there every day. As Andrew would say, landed the plane, and we really loved it. And we realized we could do this full time. We
Mm.
had the discussion about, do we keep the house and turn it into a rental property, or do we sell the house? We really had this debate when
Hmm.
we ended up seeing a financial advisor, which I recommend to anyone considering this
Yes.
lifestyle, to really look at the financials before you jump into it. And
Hmm.
so we decided to sell the house. And because we had this underlying motto, keep it simple. We
Hmm.
didn't want unexpected expenses. We didn't want the hassle of dealing with difficult tenants and,
Yeah.
and so on. And we also knew we didn't want to live in Toronto long term. So once we did decide where we wanted to live, it likely wouldn't be in Toronto. So we were okay with kind of exiting the real estate market of the city. And so it was about almost a year later after our Costa Rica trial that we moved out on September 1st and started to travel full time. And at the same time, my daughter was starting first year university. So it was a really interesting time. I would say a little bit of an identity crisis,
Mhm.
really trying to think about who am I now without
Without your child or
without my
children. Yeah.
job. I have an empty nest. I'm not a homeowner. And on top of that, my partner, Andrew, decided to pursue a childhood dream to sail around the world. So that's what he's doing right now. And so
Oh.
I didn't even have a partner, so I felt like really stripped bare in so many ways. And so he started his race last September, and I started to solo travel. And I went into that a little reluctantly. I had some fears about traveling alone. Um, but 8 months later, now I look back at the experience, and it's just been, I think, the most wonderful thing, other than having my daughter, the most
Yeah.
wonderful thing I've
Yeah.
ever done.
Well, I know that you mentioned being reluctant about the solo travels, but it sounds like too this path that you started beforehand almost prepared you. I want to talk a little bit about anxiety because there's a lot of anxiety sort of wrapped around that whole, or fears wrapped around the idea of solo travel for women. And I would love to see every woman get over that, right? But, there are, and it sounds like you have discovered some techniques that could help anybody, but also, helped you almost be ready for this place, right? That you're at right now. So, um, maybe share, I know you said you had struggled with anxiety. Many people, I'm sure, could relate to what that feels like.
Hmm.
But share with maybe how you've used what the tools that you've learned and what you teach with how you can help, the whole idea of anxiety and travel and how that could, they come together at some point, possibly, whether it's in the planning stages, right? You get overwhelmed, or maybe it's when you actually get there, you get off the plane and suddenly you're just like having a panic attack, right?
Hmm.
So maybe share, if you have some stories of your own, or maybe what you think would be beneficial to women that maybe experience that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is overwhelming at first. When I was looking at 8 months of complete openness, I didn't even know where to begin.
Mhm.
And I came from an environment that had plans and contingency plans for those contingency plans.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's like this whole illusion, though, of control, because I
Mhm.
I learned very, very quickly we really have no control.
Mhm.
When Andrew and I first started to travel, I had an Excel spreadsheet. I had every flight, every accommodation, the dates, everything on a spreadsheet. I'd given it to his parents and my
Mhm.
daughter. And every single thing on that spreadsheet changed.
Mhm.
Everything. I mean,
I
I
can guarantee it. Yes.
I broke my leg 6 weeks into
Oh,
our nomad
no.
journey. Yes, it was. I was in Croatia hiking. It was. We can talk about that later.
Yeah.
I'll answer your
Okay.
question
We
first.
might have to get to that. Yeah.
But so I learned very early on not to get too far ahead of myself. And so when I started traveling on my own, I had a few things in my calendar that I knew I wanted to do because they were, activities I had to register for and pay
Mhm.
for before they filled up. And so I had these milestone events in the schedule, but then complete openness in between these key activities. And so I started in Portugal, and it was with a group of women who were also digital nomads, also over 50. And it was a pathways program. So it was a perfect way to
Yes.
start. I mean, I got really lucky with the timing of this. But I also met some women that to even to now we're in regular contact. We've become really good friends, which happens all the time when you travel alone. You meet some
Yes.
wonderful people, and so I say I'm never alone. There isn't the opportunity to be lonely because you meet people along the way. So with these two women, after this week in Portugal, we decided to travel together for a while. and we did a little road trip, stopped in villages along the way to Porto. We spent a few days together in Porto, and then we kind of all went and did our own thing. And I feel like, in a way, I have been guided. And when I left the bank, I said it felt like, my whole career, I had my hands on the steering wheel.
Mhm.
I was in control and driving where the car was going or directing the car. When I left the bank, I would let go of that steering wheel. And
Mm.
there was this trust that the car was going to go where it's meant to go. And I felt like that for a long time. When I started my solo travel, that shifted a little bit, and it felt more like I'm following the breadcrumbs. And I don't know where they're leading me to, but I'm just following one at a time.
Yeah.
And that's how I would describe this 8 months of travel. It was just following those breadcrumbs. And it's led me to, some really interesting experiences and beautiful people and beautiful friendships. So I'm really grateful. I did learn, though, that the transition days, I found those stressful.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
I just really wanted to get to the next place. And I know a lot of people who embrace those travel days and they love them. I'm still trying to love them. I find them difficult, but not to the point where I get anxiety, because I've learned to schedule my time
Yeah.
during the transitions in a way that makes it as easy as possible. It might be an extra night somewhere in a hotel near the airport instead of trying to go and get it all done and, in one go. I kind of hop, skip, and jump to where I'm going. I don't book meetings, so I block my calendar. Yeah, I try to enjoy that time as best as I can, but it's still, I don't sleep the night before.
Mm.
Um, so I'm still working on it. I think I'm a lot better than when I started. A lot better. I'm less nervous about those days now. Now I just kind of
Good.
know I need to get through them. But yeah, so you learn those things along the way.
Yeah, I
Uh,
love how you've discovered that about yourself
yeah,
and
yeah,
you're working on that. I mean, we're all a work in progress, right?
yes,
And
yes.
we all have different things that might make us anxious surrounding travel or just day-to-day life. Yeah, airports can be they can be really, I mean, some people I don't mind them, but my part is I don't like the waiting so much, waiting
Mhm,
around or wasting my
mhm.
time. But I've learned to, like you said, I've learned to sort of embrace that time as like, well, I'd rather have extra time, right, than be
Yeah,
rushing.
yeah.
So I always come with a book or listen to a podcast or something that I know in my day-to-day life I may not even have the time to do. So like this is almost like a little treat. Like I get this time to just sort of, yeah, I'm waiting for a plane. It can be airports can be noisy, but like you discovered about yourself the transition days, I've discovered waiting at airports, right? How to utilize that time and
Mhm.
not be so anxious about just the waiting period, right?
Yeah. And what
So,
I like to do at airports is a little bit of shopping because I don't really shop that much
oh, okay.
when I'm traveling. And there's some great gift shops. So it's a good place to grab a few souvenirs
Yeah.
if you haven't, if you
If you
haven't done
haven't
that
done
with
it, yeah.
family and friends. And so I take my time, and it's also
Yeah.
like when you're in different countries, the food
Mhm.
is different and
Yeah.
everything's different. And so I just kind of like exploring and trying the food. I really like trying different foods in different
Yeah.
countries. So I also like to use the opportunity to do that at airports. And once I'm okay in an airport, it's kind of, I think it's
It's the
just
getting there and stuff.
forgetting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Hmm. Hmm.
that can be stressful if you're in an area that maybe doesn't have really good um, transportation system or infrastructure. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
finding your way is part of the part of the journey. I'd like to go back to you mentioned forest therapy. I know it is forest bathing. I think the terms are probably interchangeable. Um,
There.
you kind of explained it a little bit, but maybe for my folks that are not familiar, like I mentioned to you, my son didn't know what it was. And
Mm.
when he went to Japan, I asked him if he was going to do it, and he thought it was walking in the forest naked. But
A lot
so
of people do.
some
Yeah.
people
Well,
do. But maybe you can give us a nice definition of it.
sure.
And then how do you use that uh, currently in your travels?
Mhm. Well, forest therapy started in Japan, and it's known there as Shinrin-yoku. It's actually quite different today in Japan than it's kind of evolved in other countries around the world. But it is typically it's a 2 to 3 hour experience. And I think of it as mindfulness in the forest. There's a process that a guide takes the group through that brings them into this liminal space where you lose all sense of time.
Mm,
And the experience is different for everyone in that they'll notice different things. Some people might tune into the sounds around them, or some people might really just be focusing in on the leaves of trees or the shadows
mhm,
on the forest floor. And so we have what we call invitations that we use to help people focus in on different parts of the walk. It's a very, very slow walk. It's not it's not a hike. It's not a botany tour.
mm.
We're not
Okay.
pointing out any plants or naming
Okay.
things. It's really, about opening up all of your senses and getting you very grounded in that place, in that environment. And then slowly noticing what you're noticing and just spending time with it. And, the kinds of things that come up for people, sometimes there's grief.
Mm,
Sometimes, grief in a, I can't believe this forest is in my neighborhood and I never
yeah.
even noticed all of these things, like, wow, what are we doing to the planet kind of grief.
Mm, mhm,
I mean, I was just at a retreat on the weekend and it gets very emotional because we just rush through our lives so quickly that when we stop, all this stuff comes up that we're just holding
mhm,
inside. And
mhm.
so it can be very emotional for people to just start to keep thinking about their lives, where they are in their lives. And that's the therapy part. And we say the forest is the therapist. I'm not a therapist. I just opened the door to the experience. The
Okay.
forest is the therapist. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you're right. Sometimes it's called forest therapy. Sometimes it's forest bathing. Shinrin Yoku translates to forest bathing.
Okay. Yeah.
And at the end of the walk, we typically have a tea ceremony,
Mm.
and we sit, and there's a lot of sitting on the ground, on the earth.
Yeah.
So we sit in a circle. We have some tea that's usually made from some plants that have been foraged from that area. And so you've opened up all of your senses, and now you're incorporating the forest with the tea. And we use that also for any sharing that people want to discuss with the group. It's quite beautiful.
Mm.
Um, it's also the tea ceremony. The other purpose is we have a snack because people are kind of zoned out and they're so relaxed that the chewing of the snacks helps wake them up so they can safely get back in their cars and drive home.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm. Yeah. So it's wonderful because what I love about it is it opens people's eyes to nature and the beauty of it. And the realization that we are nature, like we are connected to the earth, the air, the fire, the sun,
Yeah.
and the water. When you have that experience, you just feel very connected to the earth.
Hmm. So in your travels, do you try to do that yourself when you go to different places?
I do. If there's a forest, you'll find me in the forest. I have a practice that I've started wherever I go that really helps me get grounded and oriented to that place, because moving from place to place can feel very discombobulating. It's
Yeah.
like some days I wake up like, where am I again?
Yeah.
Oh, right, I'm in Thailand. And so I call it a gratitude mandala, and I just create these mandalas on the earth. Sometimes they're made with shells and flowers on a beach. Sometimes they're in the forest. Or sometimes I did a beautiful one in Bali with frangipani
Mm,
flowers on the lawn. And it's just like a circle that's oriented to the four directions, north, south, east, west.
mhm.
And I do a gratitude to each of the directions and to each of the elements. And because it's oriented, and I know, oh, okay, in this place, north is that way. So it actually physically helps me get oriented, but also like spiritually helps me feel connected to the place that I'm in.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I
Mhm.
like that you said discombobulated, disconnect. I mean, I like that word a lot.
Yeah,
Disconnected. Yeah. Cause
yeah.
you're right. You could wake up if you've been traveling a lot and go, where am I? And yeah.
It's happened a few times.
Yes.
It's happened a few times.
Yes.
Yeah, and the other thing, I mean, I have guided a few walks on my travels. Um, but in some countries, I was trained in Canada. I know what to look out for here as far as, plants to be that,
Mm,
or maybe toxic. But
yeah.
in a country like Vietnam or Thailand or Australia, oh my goodness, I'm not
Oh,
sitting on the ground in the forest in Australia. There's so many venomous snakes and
yes.
spiders. It's a
Snakes and
very
spiders.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I do is I meet with other forest therapy guides
Okay.
when I travel, and I share their stories. So I write a little blog about meeting them, and they take me to their trails or their favorite parks. I learn so much about the wildlife and the plants in all these different places. And it's just my favorite thing is to connect with people.
I was just gonna
So,
say it's bringing
mhm.
you connection with people that are actually from there, which is
Yeah.
another great way. Some people do it through food, and it sounds like you do it through this forest
Mhm.
therapy
Mhm.
group. So that's amazing. Yes. Well, you've been traveling for 8 months, right? By yourself. Where are some places you've gone? And then like I hate to ask, but so far, what has been your favorite, or I should say maybe most transformative place that you have gone to?
Even
So it's
that's
hard to
a
pick a
hard one.
favorite because I feel like every place has its purpose in the season that you're in, possibly. And so it's hard to equate, you know, one against the other because you may have been in a different space in your life at the time. So having a different appreciation for that space. So I like to maybe just say, what so far has been maybe the most transformative place you've been to.
Mhm. That is hard for
I'm
me to
sorry.
answer
Maybe that's a
too.
hard
It's
question for you.
almost just as hard because a lot of the places I go I go for spiritual reasons.
Okay.
So I spent 2 weeks at the end of September and the first week of October at a Plum Village monastery. And
Mm.
The Plum Village monasteries were started by the Vietnamese Zen
Okay,
master
yeah,
Thich Nhat
Vietnam.
Hanh.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's from Vietnam. And when he was exiled during the war, he ended up in France and started this community. And so it's quite it's a movement that's grown around the world. And I lived with the nuns in the lower hamlet. There's three different hamlets, one for the monks, and which is where Thich Nhat Hanh lived, the upper hamlet, and then there's two for the nuns. And I really enjoyed that. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a book called Love Letters to Mother Earth. So, of course,
Mhm.
as a forest therapy guide, that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And every day they do a mindfulness walk through the forest. And it's in silence. It's
Mm.
very slow. At one point, they stop and they sit and they just listen. There's so many parallels to forest therapy. And there's a mindfulness bell that they ring throughout the day. And when the bell goes off, everyone stops what they're doing, stops talking, and just takes a moment to come back into the present moment, come
Yeah.
back to yourself. And so the mindfulness practices that are just woven throughout the day um, are practices that I've brought home with me. So
Hmm.
it was a great experience. Now, the first 3 days into it, I realized I had COVID.
Oh,
So
no.
I know, can you imagine? So here I'm in a monastery in isolation. It was
Well, I mean, it's probably a good place. I don't know. I feel,
it actually was a good place.
yeah.
The sisters were so compassionate, and they moved me to a room where I could be on my own with the washroom. They brought food from the Happy Farm, so food that's grown there, so that I can
Hmm.
prepare my own meals. And some of the participants would come and visit me. We'd sit outside and they would tell me about their day and what they learned. And so it ended up being,
Yeah.
yeah, it was quite a beautiful experience, actually.
Wow. That sounds amazing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any other special places that you've been
Oh,
so far? I know it was probably, well, and actually, you said you have a book coming out, and I'm sure you highlight some of these places in your book. Yes.
I
Like,
do. Yeah.
okay.
Share the whole
So,
journey.
oh,
Yeah.
well, then tell us about this book. I know it's coming out soon. By the time
Yes.
this airs, it'll probably be launched or out there. So go ahead and share with
Thank
the
you.
audience about the book and
Thank
where we
you.
can get it.
It is launching June the 10th. So
Okay.
in less than 2 weeks from our recording. And I have it here for people to see. It's called
Yes.
Lost Intentionally, the Inner
Okay.
and Outer Journey of a Spiritual Nomad. And it just tells the whole story. Actually, what's interesting though is um, after I left the bank, I did a 10-day silent retreat. It was a Buddhist meditation retreat of Vipassana. And this book was, I was day 5 of the retreat and 2 hours in a deep meditation. And this book just was just like there, just appeared, the whole thing. So it took me 2 years to write it because I kind of sometimes had it on pause and
Mm-hmm.
would pick up again. And so it tells the story of, where I was before I started putting all these practices in place,
Right.
and ends in Bali. So it starts in Bali when I had that breath, that
Yeah.
realization of
Yes.
my anxiety, and it just by chance ends in Bali. So I finished writing the book last
Oh,
November. And my
okay.
publisher, like originally I was going to end the story when I sold my house and we were about to embark on our travels. And my publisher said, no, 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 you have to finish, like you have to bring it to your present moment, which just
Yeah.
happened to be I was in Bali. So I actually kind of like that, that it
The full
starts and finishes.
circle. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, um, today's conversation barely touched the surface, I'm sure, of all those experiences you had. So, June 10th, the book will be available to purchase, yes? And where can
June
they
11th.
purchase that?
Yeah.
June 11th.
June
Where?
11th. And it'll be on Amazon
Okay.
or any book retailer
Okay.
worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah.
June 11th, it'll be Amazon. And I think it takes about 2 weeks to get into all the other
Other places. Okay.
booksellers. Yeah.
And I'll make sure I put the title of the book in the show notes. And then do you have any social media that if people wanted to reach out to you, that we could include there?
Sure. Yes, I have. So my business is called Flourish with Monique, and it's Reiki, forest therapy, and coaching. And I also have on Instagram, Flourish with Monique,
Okay.
and on LinkedIn, because of course a lot
Cross
of my
business.
network is corporate,
Yeah.
yeah, on the business side. Yeah. So yeah, I love connecting with people. So
Okay.
do feel free to any of
Absolutely.
your uh, any of your listeners, if they'd like to chat,
Well, and
reach
it's
out.
all about the connection, connecting and finding that community, even though we're traveling solo, right? Finding
Mhm,
that community. And
mhm.
then, speaking of which, is there any last little nugget of truth or encouragement that you would just like to offer to
Mhm.
my audience?
Mm. I think that the fear of the unknown can really hold you back from doing things. And the fear is always greater than the reality,
Hmm.
So I know when I think about when I was starting to travel on my own and the things I worried about, like what I worried about the most was losing my phone. And someone suggested getting a lanyard. So I had this tethered to me all the time because I was
Mhm.
so, our lives are on our phones.
Yeah.
But those were the things I was worrying about then. And now I'm not worrying about things because I know I can do it. And so can you. And I think it's just kind of, if people are nervous about traveling on their own, just start small.
Mhm.
Just go on maybe a weekend somewhere nearby and see how that feels. But I'll tell you, there are a lot of women like us out there who are doing this, and you're really rarely alone. If you are, you do have to take the initiative to like
Mhm.
go on a walking tour,
Yes.
sign up, go on an Airbnb experience. There's so
Mhm.
many amazing Airbnb experiences locally that you can try a cooking class. So get out there. Um,
Yes.
and don't stay in your hotel room.
Oh,
Start meeting
right.
people. It's so fun. Yeah, once you start, it's so fun. My daughter always says, like, Mom, you have to talk to everybody. It's like, yeah, I do. It's why not? I've learned
Yes.
too, if you talk to someone long enough, there's some connection. It's really
Yes.
incredible.
It is.
Mhm.
It really is. Yeah. And everybody has a story, which I love to hear all the time.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. That's why you have
Well,
this great podcast.
yes, I'm hoping to keep sharing more of these stories for
Yeah,
sure. But Monique, it's been a pleasure having you on my show today. And I'll make sure I include all those things in the show notes for anybody that wants to buy your book and even get in touch with you. So,
thank you.
again, thank
I
you so
appreciate
much for
that.
your time. It's
Thank
been an
you.
honor. Yes, beautiful. Thank you.